You're joining us now or watching later online, I warmly welcome you to this Connecting Communities Forum, focused on the needs and interests of Bath. I'm Nicolette, a citizen of Bath for almost 20 years, and a regenerative and policy development professional for rather longer. As such, I'm passionate about the enduring well-being of the diverse people and interconnected communities and places that make our city what it is. But I'm also aware of the many challenges that already are and will increasingly threaten such well-being. Many global in origin, but impacting us locally, such as climate change, biodiversity loss, and impoverished and scarce land. Global and national political instability. Others to do with the wider economic systems we're enmeshed in. Rising prices and decreasing security around life's essentials, food, warmth, healthcare and housing. And particularly worrying for our city is that those least able to do so are increasingly bearing the costs and pains of these deficiencies. Such systemic challenges requires local authorities and the citizens they serve to build common cause and collaborate like never before. And it's in this spirit that I hope you will embrace tonight's agenda. An agenda comprising strategies and statutory plans, setting the enabling conditions for us to live well, together with ample opportunity to ensure that they address the needs and aspirations of our particular communities and the places we call home. And so with that said, I want to start by showing with how some citizens can and are joining together and rising to the challenge that beset us. And so firstly, if I can see her on the screen, I hope we have Lynn Patterson, there you are, and who will tell us about a new climate hub. So do unmute yourself, Lynn.
Thank you very much, Nicolette. Can you hear me all right?
Yep.
Okay. I'm introducing the Climate Hub Bath and Northeast Somerset. Imagine you're walking along a street in central Bath, feeling glum about all the shops that have closed down. Suddenly, you see a bright, colorful window display for Climate Hub Bath and Northeast Somerset. Intrigued, you walk in and are greeted by a smiling volunteer and the smell of coffee. You scan the space, open, airy, with doors leading to separate rooms and the buzz of conversation drifting in. There is a children's area, a coffee bar, library, clothes swap rail, and energy information table, sofa areas, a collaboration area where all the eco groups have their information leaflets. A big calendar on the wall shows the hub's forthcoming events, exhibitions, eco-drama, eco-psychology support groups, and hub members meetings, to name just a few. Dazzled, you sit down on a sofa and ask a volunteer to explain what this is all about. He tells you that Climate Hub Baines is an independent charity and company established in 2022, but inspired by a network of climate emergency centers all over the UK. And here's a little map of some of these centers all over the UK. Some are being set up in the process and some have been established for some time. Right. In Bath, even before the hub became a charity in December, it had been preceded by 2 years of Green Outreach Hub pop-up stalls, festival appearances, and small shop presences. Incidentally, you can visit another pop-up in Kingsmead Square on the 4th of March, 11 to 3, weather permitting. Now imagine you're attending the Bath Area Forum, hearing questions and answers. You hear this question: are you aware that this center will help fulfill the aims of Baines Council's Climate and Ecological Emergency Declaration? Answer: yes. The council has said, quote, by 2030, we will need to be able to balance our carbon emissions to ensure that the level of greenhouse gas we release into the atmosphere is no greater than the amount we remove. Tall order. The Climate Hub can help with communication between the public and the council on climate change initiatives. Another question: where, oh, where is this lovely center based? In plans and dreams at the moment, until we find a shop owner or supportive landlord who sees the financial business rate benefit of allowing a charity to occupy their empty premises by providing community benefit in offering short-term meanwhile lease. What, you may ask, is the tax benefit? A charity is relieved automatically of 80% of the business rate. The council has discretionary powers to waive the remaining 20%. Or it could be paid by a supportive landlord under the community benefit scheme. You may hear a question: how many of you are actively organizing this? The 7 trustees are the most active, but the mailing list is 114. We are working closely with Transition Bath and are part of the e-cooperation WhatsApp group connecting many organizations. Another question might be, what do you need right now? Well, a venue. We have a team looking, but any offers? Also, we need a website designer, social media officer, and more volunteers to help staff the pub. Another final question: why did you include Northeast Somerset in your name when you're based in Central Bath? Answer: because we anticipate that centers like Radstock, Peasdown, Keynsham, etc. will want their own hubs eventually, and it can be a long process getting charity approval. So we are happy to take such centers under our wing, providing they agree with our constitution and purposes. If you think this is a good initiative, let me have your details to add you to the mailing list so you can choose your level of involvement as time goes on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lynn. I don't know if anybody's got any thoughts or comments or questions for Lynn. Do put them into the chat and we will come back to them later. But whilst we're doing that, let's go straight on to Anne-Marie Martin, who is going to talk to us about Homes for Ukraine.
Hello everyone, thank you for letting me come to this meeting. My name is Anne-Marie Martin. I'm working with the Homes for Ukraine team for Bath and North East Somerset Council. My focus of my role is to provide housing advice, and that's to guests and sponsors that are hosting with the Homes for Ukraine team. Can I ask, is there anyone on the call in this meeting that is hosting at the minute and's got guests? I take that that's a no. That's fine. So I wanted to sort of let you know that at the minute we've got around 145 sponsors and about 294 guests living with those 145 sponsors. Most of them are in the BA1 and BA2 area, and there's around 15 in kind of Keynsham, Salford, and some further afield in the Chew Valley. So the government initially asked sponsors to have guests for 6 months, and then that got extended to 12 months, and now the government has extended the scheme to 2 years. So we've put together a housing strategy, and in the first instance we're asking if possible for guests to stay in their sponsors' homes. If that's not possible, because we're aware that the government has extended the scheme, so this puts more pressure on sponsors, we will look for another new kind of rematch sponsor for the household. If that's not possible, then they can look for private rented accommodation, and we have a landlord incentive scheme where we're paying a top up to the local housing allowance to help people secure private rented accommodation. So the focus of our team, or my role in particular, is to prevent households becoming homeless and putting more strain on the system when in Baines we've already got a higher number of households in emergency accommodation than we've had for 3 years. So the purpose of coming to this meeting really was to ask if through your networks we need to increase our number of sponsors that are coming forward. There was a lot of people that expressed an interest initially on Foundry, the government system, but that interest has dwindled. So we're not getting so many households from Ukraine coming now. We're expecting around 20 to 25 guests. But moving down the line, we've got sponsorships that are breaking down. You know, people want their own homes back, the situation, you know, their own circumstances have changed. So we're looking for more sponsors, and also we're looking for more people that might be prepared to privately rent their house to a Ukrainian family. So, like I said, we've got the landlord incentive where we're offering additional top up to the local housing allowance. And also we've got an empty property initiative where if somebody owns an empty property, they can apply for a grant for up to £1,000, and if they bring that property back into use, then we will work with them to rent their property out to a Ukrainian family for 12 months. So that's why I wanted to come to this meeting. We're doing an event in the Guildhall on Thursday, and during that event, that's for sponsors and guests, and we're also trying to drum up some support again for more sponsors coming forward that are willing to host a family, and also for landlords who might have a private rented property. So that's on Thursday, and that's in the Guildhall. It's 10:30 till 2:30. So there's going to be housing options, home search. There's obviously a lack of social housing, which I'm sure you're all aware of, which puts, you know, makes it difficult for us and difficult for anyone who lives in Bath and North East Somerset. There's also the issue of affordability. It's very expensive to live in Bath and North East Somerset, particularly in the city area. So also there's going to be this department, developing health and independence. They're going to be there giving advice on how to sustain a tenancy, what the cost of living is, and so that people understand what their responsibilities are when they've got their own tenancy. We're also going to have our private rented officer will be there giving advice on how to look for private rented accommodation. Also, Bath welcomes refugees. They will be there advising, you know, telling people about the support services that they have in place, and DWP as well, and employability. So there's going to be, it's focused on housing, but all of those things are obviously interlinked. So we're doing a market style event where we've got different kind of partners that are working with the council to try and find long-term accommodation for Ukrainian households. So that's me in a nutshell. I just wanted to come along just to sort of spread the word, really. And so if you could, you know, if you know of anybody, then please let the Homes for Ukraine team know. So the address is h4u at bathnes.gov.uk. Thank you. if anyone's got any questions. Lynn's got her hand up.
Yeah.
What happens after a year?
The government's just extended the scheme to 2 years. So do you mean for sponsors, or do you mean for being in accommodation?
Being in accommodation.
Being accommodation. Well, what we're hoping is during that initial year, the top up we're paying is a maximum of £300, and we're hoping that people during the first year, they will be able to improve their English, improve their employability, get employment. So we're hoping that we don't have to support many families into the second year, but we are able to do that now we've got government funding. I should have said as well that the government have given local authorities money to bring properties back into use. So we have got some council properties that we're going to look to, sort of bring back into use, and also an idea of buying some properties through the housing company that Baines owns, to create more properties. That's for 20 houses for Ukrainians and 2 houses for Syrian and Afghan refugees. So we're hoping that moving forward there aren't many families that will need the top up for us, but we will consider it on an individual basis. Any other questions?
I think there's one in the chat from David Redwell, or maybe it's just a comment actually. Just saying Ukraine employment has been.
That's worth knowing. Yeah, that's great. Thank you. I mean, can I ask about the English level though, because we are coming across barriers where so some employers are asking for GCSE English, and a lot of Ukrainians are doing the English as a spoken language through Bath Welcome to Refugees and Bath College, but some employers won't even look at a Ukrainian if they don't have GCSE English language, which is obviously proving difficult. If David might be able to unmute and say, if that's not a barrier in
no, can you hear me, Chair? It's not a barrier. First Group will help with training and with education. So please make contact with Dan Norris and Doug Claringbold at First PLC.
Okay.
On the bus side.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much, David. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Anne-Marie. That's a really exciting update, really, and also a challenging one, I guess. So I hope people will have absorbed all that information, and you'll get lots of people coming on Thursday or getting in contact.
Thank you. Thanks very much. And thank you, everyone.
Okay, so moving on, and we're now going to have it's in some ways it's more of an update than actually sort of really getting into in-depth conversation about these 2 very important, well, one strategy and the local plan. I see them as very important because they are the strategies and the plans which are really setting the enabling conditions, or have the potential to empower us and support us in improved living well, both in terms of our health and all the social and physical infrastructure and needed in our locality, or not so much our locality as the various parts of Bath which are important to us. So I'm going to hand over to Fidelia to talk about the health and wellbeing strategy, and then going seamlessly on to Steve George to give us an update on the plan, the local plan. And we'll take questions if you have any on both of those after them. So can't see.
Hi, I'm here. Hello.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead. You're just jumping around my screen. That's it.
Hello, good evening, everyone. So I'm just going to share an update about where we're at in regards to developing the new health and wellbeing strategy for Bath and Northeast Somerset. So we came to this forum in the initial stages when we were trying to get some input into the priority setting. So it's only fitting that we come back and say, okay, this is the knowledge you've helped us to generate. And I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to go through what we're going to be looking at is the signed off priorities as well as the ways of working. And of course, I would really appreciate your feedback as to whether or not these strategies, these priorities align with the work that you're currently doing, you, your teams and organizations and so on. Okay. Okay, get this on the slide here. So as I mentioned, so it sets out the signed off priorities. So these priorities were signed off by the Health and Wellbeing Board in January, as well as the ways of working. So how we intend to work together to achieve the priorities or to achieve the objectives. It outlines the steps taken to identify the priorities and the teams, of course, that were helpful in our process to do so. So these are the questions I want you to think about as I'm going through them. Did the priorities speak to your team, organization? Are they far removed from what you're currently doing? And are there any gaps? To identify the priorities, we started by having a public consultation period, September 29th to the 31st of October. We also had countless engagement meetings with voluntary community social enterprise groups. We engaged with 8 CRG care group providers. And of course, we had some one-on-one meetings with people whenever they requested. We also engaged in these area forums as well. Following the identifying of the priorities in the initial stages, we, of course, met with the steering group who've been helpful in guiding us throughout this process. What we felt would be useful was for us to go to the different departments within the council, within NHS, and to see if the priorities are the right ones. If not, what do we need to change to make them the right ones? The role of the steering group. So the steering group has continued to meet monthly to review the strategy related documents, discuss the overall progress of the strategy. So we discuss key achievements, potential risks, any challenges that we're facing. And of course, in the last steering group meeting, we would have gone through the final edits of the priorities. Those were the ones that were taken to the Health and Wellbeing Board. Okay, so here are the ways of working. So our partners and organizations leading the implementation of actions in the strategies and implementation plan are encouraged to incorporate the following principles into their planning and delivery. So tackling inequalities, adaptation and resilience to climate impacts, share responsibility and engage for change, deliver for all life stages. Priority 1 for the strategy is ensure that children and young people are healthy and ready for learning and education. So the objective 1.1 is strengthen family resilience to ensure children and young people can experience the best start in life. 1.2, improve timely access to appropriate family and well-being support. 1.3, reduce the existing educational attainment gap for disadvantaged children and young people. 1.4, ensure services for children and young people who need support for emotional health and well-being are needs-led and tailored to respond and provide appropriate care and support. So this would be from early help to statutory support services. And the second priority, improve skills, good work, and employment. 2.1, work with providers of education and other partners to prepare for, support, and mentor individuals to engage in work opportunities. Work with local employers to encourage, incentivize, and promote good quality work. 2.3, support the development of and access to an inclusive labor market, focusing on engaging our disadvantaged and vulnerable populations to support them to participate in meaningful work opportunities. And the last one, prioritize inclusiveness and social value as employers, purchasers, and investors in the local economy. Number 3, strengthen compassionate and healthy communities. Continue to develop the infrastructure that encourages and enables individuals, organizations, and networks to work together with the shared aim of supporting people in need and building strong local communities. 2.2, encourage proactive engagement and healthy lifestyle practices at all stages for good quality of life. Develop a strategic approach to social prescribing, enable people to remain healthy and manage physical and mental health conditions. And the last one, create health promoting places. This one has 5, so I'll go through them quickly. Utilize the local plan as an opportunity to shape, promote, and deliver healthy and sustainable places and reduce inequalities. Improve take-up of low carbon. So these 2 are very specific to housing. And we had our colleagues in the housing services team who so helpfully helped us with these. So improve take-up of low carbon affordable warmth support for private housing and encourage being social housing providers to provide low carbon affordable warmth for existing social housing to help prevent damp and mold and cold-related illnesses. Maximize opportunities in legislation to facilitate targeted private rented sector inspection program. Ensure the minimum statutory housing and energy efficiency standards are met. Improve access to physical and mental health services for all ages via the development of integrated neighborhood teams, community-based specialist services, and/or specialist centers. And the last one, the NHS, local authority, third sector, and other partners to increasingly embed prevention. I need this to go down. Increasingly embed prevention and inequalities in their, I'm not able to see, I'm sorry. Hold on, let me stop sharing just so I can see it. Embed prevention and inequalities action into their planning and prioritization. I'll share again. Okay, so based on the 4 priorities and their objectives, it would be useful to be able to find out from everyone in the forum, you feel as though these priorities speak to your team and organizations, the work that you're currently doing. If they seem far removed from what you're currently doing, that will also be helpful for us to know as well too. Anything that you could feedback would be useful. Any comments would be appreciated. If you'd like me to go back to a slide so you can look at it again, that would also be okay as well. No comment? Does that mean we did a wonderful job?
Yeah.
Someone's hand is up.
Oh.
Joelle?
I was going to ask a question and then I'll pass on to Joel, who's got a question. A lot of this is all very, very generic at this level, that you've got the sort of priorities that are coming through.
Mm-hmm.
And even one of the last ones which caught my eye was on the 4.5, was embed prevention and inequalities in action in priorities. So how practically are you going to do that? Because there are huge inequalities across Bath in health, and also those inequalities that integral with access to work, to good quality housing, and all these.
You want to understand how is in practice, in actual, how is it going to work? So what we've done, we've been able to create a really good working relationship with all of the areas, because as you can tell, this is it's a wider determinants approach that we're taking with this strategy. It doesn't really speak necessarily directly to like health and well-being, but you're looking at education, employment, housing. So what it is that the implementation plan that sits under this strategy, which is also currently being developed, is going to speak to the direct actions that are going to be taken by these teams. We have a series of meetings that are coming up. We've already had a few with the teams that we will be working closely with to determine what actions need to be taken specifically. So what are they already working on in these areas, and what other actions need to be taken based on the findings and the evidence in the strategic evidence base that will help to improve in these areas. So while the strategy it can seem high level, that implementation plan that will actually be a part of the document will be a bit more specific about the actions that will be taken to address the areas.
And just what are the integrated neighbourhood teams? Who do they comprise?
The integrated neighbourhood teams is a NHS ICB. I think Laura might be able to speak more to that. That is one of those that is directly going to be an action taken by our NHS colleagues and everyone that sits on the Health and Wellbeing Board that works under the ICB. She her hand is up,
so I'll go. Can I jump to her and then I'll come back to you, Joel?
Thank you, Chair. And yeah, Fidelia, you're spot on. So integrated neighbourhood teams is going to be an initiative that we'll be doing in partnership. It's something that we're looking at as the Integrated Care Board. I touch on it in my slide deck if that's helpful, Nicolette, when we come on to my little slot later. So I'm happy to cover it there if helpful, but what Fidelia says is spot on. Yeah.
Okay, well, we'll come back to it when we get to your presentation. And Joel, you had the question.
Yeah, it wasn't not a dissimilar question to yours, really. I'm thinking about my residents in Odd Down, and the strategy at the moment feels very high level. So I guess my question is how do we make it real for local communities? So will there be supporting the implementation plan, a kind of this is what's happening in Odd Down and this is what's going to be happening in different parts of the city? Or how will we be able to make it kind of real for individual residents?
I definitely believe the implementation plan will help us a lot with that area. So I think that's, I guess, my main takeaway from today is that we need to be very specific in what actions we're hoping will be taken within each area under each priority, because the actions taken. So from that, what actions need to be taken will be in the implementation plan that we will be putting. So once the documents are finalized, this will all be one document. So the strategy and the implementation plan as well, which will be speaking to more specific actions that need to be taken.
Okay, I just wanted a couple of other things. One, I just wanted to stress that actually you've given us a lot of information in those slides, which is very difficult to all absorb at this, but I think it really will be worthwhile looking through those and coming back to you with some issues or comments.
Mark has Mark has a presentation so he can share with everyone.
Yeah, I'm sure he will. And possibly includes who we can return comments to if we have them. But you also asked about gaps, and one gap which I couldn't see covered in those slides is what about people who are homeless, who have got really complex health needs as well? Do they, I mean, can we talk a lot about people who are in using education and improving the quality of the housing? Are they covered in the strategy?
Yes, they are covered in the strategy. There are some, so we see, for example, I'll just pull up one of these slides. Hold on quickly. Strengthen compassion. So priority 3, which speaks to strengthen compassionate and healthy communities. You see here we talk about continue to develop infrastructure that encourages, enables individuals, organizations, and networks to work together with the shared aim of supporting people in need and building strong local communities. So what that speaks to is our well-being hub that is already very well, very active in communities, and that does improving working more to improve the well-being of people who are homeless, for example. Okay. So that is where
it seems like we need to wait for that document which is showing all the implementation and then we can come back and
okay, so maybe I need to come back again.
Yeah,
I should come back again once we have that.
Okay.
In terms of particular groups will probably still not be named in the implementation plan, but it is important for each team to be able to decipher what speaks to the work that they do. So our homeless services teams will need to be able to capture what speaks to the work that they do and use that in their day-to-day functioning.
Okay, I need to move on because we're on. So,
Okay.
Stephen George, over to you to tell us about the local plan.
Hi there. Thank you very much, Nicolette. Yeah, my name's Steve George. I'm a senior planner in the planning policy team. So I'm one of the things I'm doing is taking an overview of the new local plan for Bath. So it's but I also wanted to update you on the local plan partial update that's we just had adopted. Could we share my presentation, please? I'm not sure who's. Thank you, Mark. Yeah, I just go on to the next slide. Yeah, so the local plan partial update was, I think it was reported at your last meeting, but it's now been adopted and will be used in the determination of planning applications. Now, just to recap on its scope, it was to update our planning policy framework to better address the climate and ecological emergencies. And actually, we're the first local authority in the country to have net zero carbon policies on new housing development. So we're quite pioneering in that regard, but we did work very closely with Cornwall Council on the evidence base that supported that. So some of the other aspects as well of the local plan partial update is to replenish the housing supply and to ensure we have the necessary supply of housing land, and to address a limited range of other urgent local issues, for example, related to green recovery and student accommodation, and finally to amend some of the policies for clarity and to ensure that they align with the up-to-date national policy. So that's some really good news. So we just go on to the next slide. Thank you. So and now we've started work on a new local plan, which will be the main statutory planning framework for managing change in Baines over the next 20 years. So it's a key document. And it'll be informed by our corporate priorities, by relevant evidence and strategies, such as the health and wellbeing strategy that we've just been talking about. And it will also reflect our recent consultations and stakeholder engagement. So it sets out the spatial priorities and policy framework, and will allocate particular sites for development. So it will set out the development requirements and the design expectations for those sites that we allocate. And these will be used in determining planning applications. So, and the key thing with the local plan is that it seeks to balance the protection of valued assets, such as the World Heritage Site in Bath, but also the setting of the city, and land uses, whilst providing this flexible approach that allows for market changes and innovation, and also for the delivery of the key projects and development of the uses that we need in the city for it to function properly. So next slide, please. So we're at the early stages in the process, and really the new local plan needs to capture this, needs to capture fresh thinking and innovative ideas if it's to provide the best possible framework for managing this change and delivering the kind of places that we want to live in and protecting what we value. So because we're at this early stage, we need to ask these questions about what the priorities are for Bath, how we can achieve a healthy and resilient future for the city, and enable more sustainable lifestyles. Where should we allow new development to meet our housing needs and for a sustainable economic development? And what are the tensions between development and World Heritage Site and other issues as well? There's always tensions, and it's part of the process, I suppose, of the planning. It's part of the planning process to resolve those tensions or manage those tensions. But also, how can we best respond to the climate and nature emergency? And what kind of bolder decisions do we need to take? Next slide. So just as an overview of the programme that we're in, we had a launch document towards the end of last year that could really sort of introduce the process and the programme and the scope of the local plan. And we've received a lot of consultation feedback on that, which will be hopefully publishing a summary of that consultation feedback probably in mid-March. I think that's the intention at the moment. And we're currently in the stage now where we're starting to identify the issues and priorities. And we had a community stakeholder workshop in Bath that I'll talk about in a bit more detail in a minute. But we've been having these kind of engagement sessions right across the district, and we've been I'm also speaking to seldom heard groups as well. So there's a variety of those we've been speaking to. We can just go on that back to that slide, please. Yeah, that's great. Thanks. As that's where we are at the moment, and then towards the middle of this year, so kind of May, June time, we'll be having more workshops, which will start to identify and explore the options and sites. So kind of all so all the time we're starting to get into more detail, and then towards the end of the year we'll be consulting on what we'll call the options document, or the issues and options document. Technically, it's known as the Reg 18 stage, but you don't need to worry about that. And that's a more formal consultation for 6 weeks that will be widely publicised, and provides an opportunity for people to get involved. And then following on from that, we aim to produce the draft plan towards the end of next year, and that will sort of collate all the evidence that we've drawn together, and that will be the plan that the council wants to adopt. Okay, next slide, please. So just a brief overview on the stakeholder workshop that we held in Bath on the 30th of January. We used the 6 key themes that emerged from the placemaking charter that we worked. We worked across the west of England on producing this charter, which is a kind of high-level charter in terms of the kind of places that we want to achieve across the west of England. Next slide, please. Thank you. So we use these themes as a way of structuring the conversation. And so the first one was zero carbon and climate resilience. And it was about ensuring that development contributes to Bain's net zero 2030 ambition and to climate resilience, and that more local clean energy is generated. And it's about this transition to greener, low carbon lifestyles and making sure it's supported for all, and that resources are used efficiently and buildings and materials are low carbon and all reused creatively. Next slide, please. And moving around, so a network of safe, attractive, direct walking, wheeling and cycling routes a frequent, affordable, accessible, high quality public transport that connects communities to key destinations and neighbourhoods that are livable to meet everyday needs. Next slide. Yeah, so the third theme was about natural spaces and biodiversity, where all communities have access to nature and high quality, biodiverse, green and blue spaces that support health and well-being. So, and to reverse habitat and species loss. So a transformational nature recovery response. Next slide, please. So this was on identity and belonging. So it's about recognizing the different characters that we have of places throughout Bath and North East Somerset, and to reflect on these and to ensure we understand the context in which we're working. Next slide. Yeah, housing and shared prosperity. So it's about ensuring that the delivery of affordable housing to respond to our particular needs. So our demographic, social, and economic needs. Looking at the wide diversity of housing needs that we have. Also looking at employment and ensuring that there are opportunities created for the types of jobs that we need, and the right space will be made available. Next slide, please. Yeah, for healthy and inclusive communities. So ensuring that communities are involved creatively in the development of proposals and the ongoing stewardship of places. The places are inclusive to people of all ages and abilities, and buildings and places support strong communities and people's health, mental health and well-being, and that there are enough places to come together. Vibrant local centres and town centres and city centres. So, so I thought it was a really interesting workshop and really valuable. And we're currently compiling the workshop report at the moment, and we can circulate that for any additional comment that that people on this call may have. But all the work that we're doing, the outputs from the various kind of or various kind of strategies that are underway at the moment, and from these stakeholder workshops, will help to inform the content that we put into the options document of the local plan in preparation for that formal consultation later on this year. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you very much, Steve. Lots of stuff to digest and reflect on. I don't know if anyone's got any immediate questions, or whether, because we're slightly late, with running late.
Chair, can I ask a question?
Yes.
Please?
Who's that?
I enjoyed the slides, but the one thing I seem to think is missing there really is two things. One is the city region, and in fact, the mayor has not done it, but has to produce a regional plan for Baines, South Gloucester and North Somerset in the city region. And after the local elections, I think that'll move forward, blocked by South Gloucestershire. But the second issue I was concerned about was the lack of economic growth and jobs and employment. It sounded all very nice, but young people in Peasdown, St John, South Bath, Twerton, and various parts of the city need jobs. Now, you know, we can obviously develop a tourism industry which employs a lot of people, both from Mendip and from Western Wilts and from the city region itself. But I didn't hear much about trying to encourage more employment growth in Bath. You know, more skill set, more development of that type of job. I'm extremely worried about that. I don't think that's a balanced plan. And I really am concerned about what seemed to be a very green plan and not a very job-centered economic development and growth plan.
Thank you,
That's-
David. Can we just ask, is Steve would like to give a response to that about needing jobs and
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it was clearly a very brief conversation and a very brief presentation, and I didn't go into all of the detail of all of the strategies that we need to respond to. A chief of which perhaps is the economic strategy that we're working on at the moment, but it's absolutely crucial, David, that we respond to the economic needs of Bath and the west of England, and actually provide those opportunities for enabling the economic growth of the city. So absolutely.
Okay. So thank you very much for the question, David. And Rachel Hudson.
Yes, hello, good evening. Steve, one of the main comments which was made by the Federation of Bath Residents Association to the first stage of the consultation was how generic the 6 themes are that you have presented. So you've discussed the placemaking charter for West of England, and quite frankly, that placemaking charter could have been for any location in the country. And those 6 themes could have been for any location in the country, and so could the structure of the plan. What they omitted to take into account was a very important 7th theme, which is that you have one of the most important World Heritage cities in the heart of the region, one which has 2 UNESCO citations. And I think it's extremely important that that is never forgotten, because it's not a golden goose that can keep laying the golden eggs. And I find it really astonishing that we have a generic structure with such a unique region, with such a unique city in the heart of that region. And that would be the overriding reaction that our association had to the framework and the approach of the new plan.
If I can just come back briefly on that. We just use the placemaking charter as a way of trying to shape some of the conversations that we had at the workshops. Those themes aren't the themes that will be in the local plan. And a key theme that was in there, though, was about the identity and about the character of places, and absolutely World Heritage are the 2 designations that we have in a city. Are absolutely fundamental. So I hear what you're saying, and I agree completely with what you're saying in terms of how fundamental that is in terms of managing change in the city.
I'll take Alex as well.
Thank you, and thanks, Steve. I was at the workshop, and I thought it was a useful one, and I'd also, I think it's also worth saying there later on that week there was also an economic strategy meeting, and it would be good maybe if we could get somebody from the economic strategy to present at this as well, just to update about that. I was quite interested though because the workshop at the end of January was quite strongly focused on principles. I'm just keen to get some reassurance that when it comes to the detail of how SPDs and the policies that affect development, how those will then also be worked through, and that we'll have sufficient time to be able to map the principles and that collective view with the way that strategies and policies are then put in place. Because we've got things like the building height strategy, we've got the views SPD, and whether there will be any revision or updates of those, and how any conclusions will have been drawn about how those will be affected or incorporated into that plan.
Okay, yes. I think in answer to that, really, Alex, is that we're starting from the broad at the moment, and actually we'll kind of drill down into more detail. So those kind of conversations will come. Other more detailed conversations will come. I think I mentioned that we've got more stakeholder engagement planned in May and June time, and actually that's when we'll start to highlight these those more detailed issues. But yeah, the kind of initial workshop was designed to be very high level, because we're at that an early stage of the plan. Okay.
We're running late. However, we've still got quite a lot to go through in the second half. So I wanted to take just a 4 minute or 5 minute comfort break. So if you want to just switch your cameras off, or I'll probably stay online. So if you don't want to have a comfort break and you want to carry on asking questions, do so, and we'll resume at in 4 minutes. So Laura Ambler. So Laura Ambler is going to speak to us about health inequalities in Bath, and she's from the Integrated Care Board. So very much looking forward to hearing what you have to tell us.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for inviting me to the forum. I'm really pleased to be here, and it's nice to see some familiar faces. I am Laura Ambler. I'm the Place Director for BAMES in the Integrated Care Board, as the Chair was saying. That's an Integrated Care Board that covers BAMES, Swindon and Wiltshire. So I'm employed by Health, but obviously working very closely with your council colleagues, and I'll explain a little bit more as I go. I've got a presentation, so I'll just share my screen. So just bear with me. Are you all seeing that presentation? I've got a split screen, so just making sure you're seeing the same thing I am.
We are, so if you can just put it onto.
Yeah, so if I move it to slideshow.
Yeah.
Is everybody still able to see the slideshow? Is that showing a full slide?
It's showing a full slide and the next slide.
Okay, that's not very helpful, is it? Let's see what I can do about that. Mark, because I'm working off of a split screen, sorry about this, would you be able to share my slides and do it on a full slideshow?
I'll certainly give it a go, yep.
Thank you, sorry about that. Well, perhaps just while we're getting the slides to work, if I explain, I've been asked to come and introduce the topic about what are health inequalities. So I'm conscious of time. I do have a slide deck, but I'm not going to go through that slide deck in length. What I'm going to do is just pick out some of the highlights for you. And what I'd like to cover is what we mean by health inequalities, an example of some stats in BAMES, why it matters, so some of the challenges, and then if you like the so what, so how are we going to work together to address this, and why we need to, what are the opportunities to help us shape. Fantastic, thank you, Mark. And then I'm going to finish on a practical example, which may be known to some of you and may be covered by other colleagues, so I won't labour that point. So if we go to the first slide then, please, Mark, thank you. When we're talking about health inequalities, what are they? Well, they're avoidable, they're unfair, and they're systematic differences in health between different groups. So if you imagine us as a virtual room, and if one half of the room has a health inequality and one doesn't, and that's just how it is, it feels deeply unfair, doesn't it? And it can be systematic, and it can be avoidable. So when we talk about differences in what? Well, it could be in health status, so things like life expectancy, I'll talk a bit more about that in a moment, or prevalence of certain health conditions, long-term conditions, etc. It could be around access to care, so availability of treatments, access to opportunity. It could be about the quality and the experience of that care. It could be about behavioural risks to health. So smoking is an obvious one. And it absolutely is about wider determinants of health. So your whole agenda today speaks to that wider determinants of health piece. And I'll talk a bit about that in a moment. When we're talking about differences in terms of who, from a health perspective, we could group people by a range of different factors. So that could be your socioeconomic status, and I'll talk a bit about deprivation in a moment. It could be geography, urban versus rural. It could be particular vulnerable groups of society or inclusion health groups, or it could be protected characteristics. So I think it's important for us to note the key message from this slide is it's broad, it's wide ranging, but absolutely it's avoidable, unfair and systematic differences is what we're talking about when we're talking about health inequalities. So if I may just go to the next slide, please, Mark. Thank you. Now, we talked about wider determinants of health there. And as I say, our whole agenda covers that today. And it's really key when we're talking about health inequalities, because actually there's something called intersectionality. And that means when you've got multiple sources of inequality, then you get intersectional identities, i.e. you're affected by a number of different discriminations or disadvantages at the same time. So there'll be individual lifestyle factors, social and community, general socioeconomic. This is another way of describing that. So for example, to bring that to life, and this is very prevalent or pertinent, I should say, not prevalent, pertinent to BAMES, those most deprived areas have on average 9 times less access to green space, higher concentrations of fast food outlets, and more limited availability of affordable, healthy food. Now, when we talk about food insecurity, a recent voice box survey for BAMES residents, 3% said that they often worried about not being able to afford food, and 8% said they sometimes did worry that food would run out. And just to put that into context, our poorest households, the poorest 10% of households, would need to spend the equivalent of close to 3/4 of their disposable income to be able to eat healthily. So you can start to see that actually those multiple sources of inequality have significant effects, and often we are looking at wider determinants of health. Now, a Marmot report published in 2010 identified that most people in England aren't living as long as the best off in society and spend longer in ill health. And I'll talk a bit more about that in a moment. And what we found 10 years on is that we still have these significant gaps in inequality. And what Marmot report said was we can only achieve meaningful change by working in partnership across the whole system and making inequalities part of everybody's business. So making inequalities part of everybody's business. So I'll come back to that in a moment, because again, that's exactly what we've been talking about on this agenda. The levers are in different places. So when Steve's talking to us about the local plan, that's one set of levers. When Fidelia is talking to us about the health and wellbeing strategy, that's another set of levers and a statutory strategy that we need to have in place. So if we can move on to the next slide, please, Mark. So I said I'd give you a flavour, and this really is just a flavour of our strategic evidence base. And this actually comes from your public health colleagues in the council around inequality in BAMES and some of the statistics. And I think it's fair to say that despite overall low levels of deprivation, perhaps across BAMES as an authority, we do have pockets of deprivation. Now, you will know that we have 2 areas that are within the most deprived 10% nationally. And often when we look at these pockets of deprivation, they're multiple deprivation and they are multi-generational and over a number of years. And as I said, the inequalities affect a wide range of local life outcomes. And in particular in BAMES, when we look at that life expectancy, it's improving except for those in the most deprived areas. So the difference, if you're male and you live in a most deprived area versus the least deprived area, your life expectancy will be 5 years shorter in those most deprived areas, 5 years. If you're female, that gap in life expectancy increases by 10 years. So 10 years shorter life expectancy. Now, the other thing that we see when we look at life expectancy, it's not just that they die sooner, but often they'll spend more of their lives with ill health or disability. And on average, that's around 17 years in ill health or with a disability. We can see in BAMES as well, there are gaps in educational attainment, particularly around free school meal cohort and those with special educational needs and disability. And that's at all stages between both boys and girls. And then we talked about some of the behavioural factors touched on earlier, and smoking is the greatest risk factor for mortality in BAMES. And we know that 1 in 4 workers in routine and manual occupations smoke. So you can see what's driving some of these inequalities. If we could go to the next slide, please, Mark. So I think this is a really helpful slide just to qualify, well, okay, so what? So what can we do about it? When you look at healthcare, that contributes about 20% to somebody's overall health. So it's about their access to care and quality to care at that point. When you look at other factors, so if we look at socio-economic factors, as I've just said, that's around 40%, physical environment, 10%. So those two together, that's half, isn't it? That's 50%. And then health behaviours are driving about a third. So the key thing here is that to reduce healthcare inequalities, we need to focus on the wider determinants, and we need to do this together, looking at key things such as equitable access, excellent experience and optimal outcomes. So if we could move to the next slide, please, Mark. And that's where I guess the drive to bring in integrated care systems came in. So integrated care systems have come in. As I said, I work for the Integrated Care Board, and the purpose of bringing them in was to bring together partner organisations to do 4 statutory functions. So they're those bullet points on the left-hand side as you look at the slide. And as you'll see, tackling inequalities is there as the second one, but actually inequalities run all the way through all of those. Now, the quote on the right-hand side is from the NHS long-term plan. And it says, while we cannot treat our way out of inequalities, the NHS can ensure that action to drive down health inequalities is central to everything that we do. So again, coming back to that point that we need to make health inequalities part of everybody's business. So if we just move on to the next slide, there's quite a lot of information on here, and obviously we'll circulate the slides afterwards. But to help us target, to help integrated care systems target action in healthcare and inequalities improvement, there's something called Core 20+5. So for the core 20% of the most deprived, as defined by the index of multiple deprivation that we just spoke about, there are some key clinical areas where we target looking at the health inequalities. So we're looking at maternity, we're looking at severe mental illness, chronic respiratory disease, early cancer diagnosis, and hypertension case finding. And obviously, as you can see, if we look at some of those ICS specific chosen ones, such as stopping smoking, they will positively impact across all of those 5 clinical areas. And if we look at some of our data, particularly around the severe mental illness, when you look in BAMES, the excess under 75 mortality in adults in BAMES is an outlier. It's one of the highest counties in England, in fact. So it's in BAMES, adults with an SMI have a 615% higher chance of premature mortality than those adults without an SMI. So that's what we're seeing in terms of outcomes and why it matters, as an example. So if we could move on, Mark, I'm just going to talk very briefly now about some of the opportunities that we've got to work together. So this is the health inequality strategy for BSW integrated care system. And we've worked on this with local authorities and many other groups. And it's got 3 parts to it. So number 1 is awareness raising. So I come back to making health inequalities part of everyone's business. Number 2 is healthcare inequality. So being really clear, what are the priorities and what are we focusing on? So that's the core 20+ diagram that I just shared with you. And then number 3 is how we do prevention around socio-economic and environmental factors. because remember, we know that that covers 50% of how those health inequalities arise. And you'll see under those priority areas that there's plenty in there for us as a forum and for us as working together in partnership to be looking at. So the role of the NHS and the council as anchor institutions, looking at the joint strategic evidence base, and indeed the health and wellbeing strategies, and looking at some of those other things that we can tackle at a place level. So we're now coming down from thinking about it as a strategic integrated care board, and we start to think about localities. So I'm just going to move on to the next slide. And you'll see the theme here is that I'm now drilling down. So in BAMES, we've got something called an Integrated Care Alliance. And as part of the Integrated Care Board, there are 3 different localities, and it won't surprise you to know that there is one in BAMES, one in Swindon, and one in Wiltshire. And in our BAMES Integrated Care Alliance, we've got reducing health inequalities as our second priority there, if you look at the priorities running down the centre of the screen vertically. So yes, we're looking at workforce or people and culture. We're looking at health inequalities. We're looking at how we might design and implement integrated neighbourhood teams. And we're looking at the transformation of community services. So there are priorities as a locality. And then when you look at the themes that are running through everything that we do, as we said, making it everybody's business is prevention and addressing health inequalities in all of the work that we do. And you'll see that there are a number of other themes there that I'm sure resonate and speak to you. So I'm conscious of time. I won't labour that anymore. I just want to get on to the last slide, which may or may not provide a segue for other speakers. But in terms of, oh, I think the slides disappeared there. Thanks, Mark. In terms of the so what and how this all comes together by way of a practical example, in BAMES, therefore, when we're looking at health inequalities and when we're thinking about what are some of the initiatives that we may have on the ground, I thought there's no better example really than the Community Wellbeing Hub. And I know that others on the call are far more experienced and qualified to talk this through than I am. So Dave Dixon, I saw on the call earlier, is certainly one of the early instigators and architects of this. And I know we've got the village agents on the call as well. But why this is important for me, this is part of that integrated neighbourhood teams coming together. So how we consolidate services working together. It's a range of different partners coming together. And what they're looking at addressing is a range of different factors, so multiple sources of what might be considered health inequalities and multiple things that might be useful to help people from a practical example. So if we look at, in particular, the Community Wellbeing Hub, and if we think about it in terms of the opportunity that it has to address some of those challenges, I think we can see it's quite significant, and it's something that's really practical and on the ground that we can do. So I'm going to pause there, Chair, because I'm just very conscious that I might be running into other presentations or others may wish to come in and talk about this more. But I'm happy to cover anything in the presentation that I've touched on.
It's a wonderful presentation and it'd be great to spend the rest of the evening discussing it. But I want to go on to the next speaker. If people have got questions, I'd really encourage you to put them into the chat, and I want to take, and when we will leave some time at the end for those questions and we'll pick some of the best ones. So take the time to frame a good question, put it in the chat, and we will get back to them. So Ruth Todd is going to speak to us about the village agent approach.
Okay, it's Denise Perrin here. I'm just going to share my screen.
Oh, sorry, I should have said and Denise.
Yeah, yeah. So can you all see my screen?
Yeah.
Each slide. Okay. So Ruth and I are going to share this tonight, and Mark will have this presentation, and I've added a lot of notes in there as well. So just to let you know that both of us are from the West of England Rural Network, and we deliver the village agent service in most of the rural areas of Bath and North East Somerset. Some of you on the outlying edges of the city might have encountered us when my colleagues have been helping with village halls and community buildings and community shops, because we're very much based in helping infrastructure in rural areas. And the village agent service has been a mission of mine from 2010. We started in the far left of the map in the rural Chew Valley, and we slowly moved across, adding the Somer Valley, Cam Valley, and at the beginning of last year we added Peasdown and Bath Avon. In May of this year, my colleague Ruth, who's on the call today and is going to talk to us in a moment about that, she joined us on a 2-year contract, which is sort of due to end towards the end of this year. Before I hand over to Ruth, I just wanted to quickly say that very much the village agent service was set up to address the difficulties people were having with living independently and staying in their own homes. And more recently, over the 13 years we've been delivering this service, we have been absolutely looking at all of those avoidable and unfair health inequalities that you've just been hearing about. That's it. So our focus is very much on health and well-being in general, but then going to the things that get in the way of that and helping people one-to-one with any of their personal issues. So it's a free and confidential service for anyone over the age of 18 years old. And most of our clients have never asked for help in the past. They're very proud, stoic, and just get on with life. So what those 13 years represents is many thousands of conversations one-to-one, coaxing people to trust us, but also start to open up about the things that have actually been causing them a bit of difficulty, they may be a bit embarrassed about, but maybe they're not even thought about the fact that living in a rural area that they should just put up and shut up, mostly they think, and they're very frightened or wary of asking for help. Now, this isn't just a rural issue. I know you're saying that already, because it's a across the whole of Baines issue. It's the villages of the centre of Bath are very similar to anything that we have already encountered in rural areas. So I'm going to hand over to Ruth just to explain about the work she's been doing in Coombe Down and Fox Hill.
Hi everybody. Thank you very much for having us here this evening. My two areas, as Denise said, I'm the village agent for Coombe Down and Fox Hill, two very different communities. I started off in Coombe Down, as I know that very well, and I popped along to the surgery and to see the doctors, the social prescribers. I went to see the amazing Peggy Dodd Centre, talked to our local councillors, the church, the ladies group and the WI, and I've given out numerous cards and leave my card in the notice board outside the co-op in Coombe Down. Despite this, there hasn't been a huge uptake of my services in Coombe Down. So I took a slightly different tack in Fox Hill, and I've planted myself in the amazing St Andrew's Community Church. I go along every Wednesday to what's called Fox Hill Focus, which is a free lunch for anybody. It's very, very welcoming. The food bank is there on a Wednesday. And having been going now for some 6-8 months, I like to think I'm kind of part of the furniture, and I pick up new referrals every week, which can be anything really. The main concerns, which won't be a surprise, of course, are money worries, money issues, rising food, energy costs, of course, and also 1 or 2 cases of managing debt that's just got out of hand, tackling online retailers and trying to negotiate repayment options. I've also been asked to support clients with housing and tenancy issues. As Denise said, some people have been able to approach their local health and housing people, but haven't really got very far, and have asked me to sort of walk alongside them and add the village agent's voice to our referrals to them. I've been asked to approach Bain's welfare support team and local charities to supply the most basic things, such as a cooker. One lady didn't have a cooker for Christmas. It's unbelievable, and it shouldn't happen. Some people just don't have the confidence to see if, you know, the services are for them, or have the skills to complete 4 or 5 page forms, often because they don't have a laptop or a printer, or even just the ability and the confidence to tackle these forms. In fact, most of the time, no, probably half the time I spend with our clients, the conversation always goes towards family issues, loneliness, low mood, and we've talked recently about physical and mental health issues, and they are very prevalent with the clients that I work with. Most visits I've made over Christmas, my clients haven't had their heating on. They're freezing. It's freezing. We sit in our coats and have our conversations because they're so worried about running up huge bills there. I'm also told that one of the large worries and problems in the Fox Hill area are drug dealers and drug users on the estate, and often the antisocial and quite frightening behaviour that comes with this. In a way of trying to look at that, I arranged for the local PCSOs to come to Fox Hill Focus, which went down very well. A number of people had wanted to talk to the police, but were quite reluctant to ask the police to come to their homes because they had a genuine fear of reprisals from the people that they were going to be talking about. But as a result of the visit, the good relationships have been established, and the residents feel that local police are listening to them, although they would like to see a much more visible presence around the Fox Hill area. Most weeks, and it happened again this morning, I had messages on my phone to say there'd been some rather antisocial behaviour over the weekend, and would I let the PCSOs know. Still worried about their names coming up on police forms and worrying about reprisals. There's good news in Fox Hill, which is very exciting, which is the community centre has now been opened again, the one next door to St Andrew's Church. They've used it as a warm space. It's been a real community effort to get it up and running again, painted, cleaned out, the brambles gone, the doors opened, and we're now looking through my village agent role at what we can do to use this space along with St Andrews. So we're looking at things like a taster session for slow cookers, always a good way to cook, and the residents have asked for more art opportunities, particularly photography, so that's something else we're looking at. But really anything that brings together the people in this area and encourages them to have a real sense of place in their community. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ruth. Mark, can you take the...
sorry, I'm just going to quickly finish off here. Sorry, I've got some more slides. Just to quickly tell you that the recurring thing of the village agents is tackling the imbalances of need and resource. And what we're doing all the time is trying to reduce the need by being able to include access to more resources by using creative thinking and taking more action locally. This is very much around taking local solutions to the party and investing in those local resources. So yes, it is about having earlier conversations with people like Ruth has described. It might be in a social setting, just having a chit chat, and then slowly it's okay, well, I can pop round and see you. Very much on preventions, so not allowing debt to get out of control. Falls prevention is a massive thing. unpaid carers that are overwhelmed, and that will start to become a costly unmet need somewhere in the not too distant future. The resources that are out there are astounding, and we find them all the time. They're those untapped resources of local skills. And the specialist support that you were just hearing about at the Community Wellbeing Hub that we tap into, we're one of the partners. There are millions and millions of pounds of unclaimed benefits, particularly attendance allowance, and we hook up a lot of people with those and with the charitable grants that are out there. It's really, really important. And finally, in March, we're starting a collaboration with the discharge teams at the hospitals, that's RUH and the community hospitals, to assist the discharge teams in improving the flow of patients through the system so that beds can be released more quickly. But a lot of that, as you know, is that there are blocks beyond the hospital in the community, and we need to find more solutions. So we're looking at that. And also, along with Age UK, we are very much looking at getting more involved at preventing people from going into hospital in the first place. So that is our mission, and we hope to be able to deliver that to Bath, hopefully this year, maybe next year, but we know it works everywhere else, so why shouldn't it work very well in your areas as well? Thank you.
Thank you very much to Denise and Ruth. It's, as somebody's put into the chat, you're absolute stars. It's absolutely amazing and really important work going on, but as you say, balancing need and resource. I hate to have to race on, but we're very much running out of time. Do put questions and comments in the chat, and I want to reserve 5 minutes at the end for addressing those. So now on to Chris Mordaunt, and I have a plea, if you can keep it to much closer to 5 minutes, that would be really appreciated. So we have time for the last input. So over to you, Chris.
Thanks, Nicole. I hear your 5 minutes. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Cool. So yeah, thank you for having us to talk. I think there is overlap with quite a lot of what the other people have said. I mean, I noticed that that there was a 10% of health issues can be attributed towards housing and well-being, and also I saw that a lot of references to cold and also falls just now. So yeah, we do get involved in those, and we try to help with prevention. So yeah, I'm Chris Mordaunt, work for Housing Services at the council, and I'm the Housing Standards and Improvement Manager. Have you got the other slide, please, Mark? Thank you. So I just wanted to start off with a quick summary, just to sort of set the scene. So this is for Baines, not just for Bath, but 83,000 individual dwellings, you know, what sort of units where people live, about 50% owner occupied, about 27% private rented, and 13% social rented, just to set the context. Out of those, all of those, at the last housing standards assessment we did, about 15% of those contained at least one hazard, which meant it didn't meet the statutory minimum standard. And the hazards we most commonly and frequently find are excess cold, and then falls and damper mold. And damper mold is largely associated with excess cold, almost always. So yeah, other hazards too. And also 28% had an energy performance certificate E or lower, which is the lower end. Next slide, please, Mark. So yeah, just this is very quickly where we fit in. So with housing services also do enabling social housing development, housing options and advice. And my team are they call it the Better Homes regulation of housing standards, we do work on affordable warmth, energy efficiency, and adaptations for independent living. Next slide, please, Mark. Yeah, so the regulation enforcement. So we do reactive and proactive. So people can contact us about problems they've got with housing conditions, and we'll try and help. Well, let's do an assessment and we'll signpost or actually take action in this case of a private landlord. The important thing here, I think, in terms of place shaping is that we're just commissioning a new house condition survey to inform, approach to including future enforcement for the private rented sector and improving housing conditions this year. We're doing that at the moment. There's a little bit there about our adaptation services, which is the Disabled Facilities Grant. And in terms of affordable warmth, we've got the Energy at Home website, energyathome.org.uk, run by Housing Services in Baines and Sustainability, which provides signposting and information for improving energy efficiency and any local grants and loans that are available. And a current scheme at the moment is Bright Green Homes, so that is worth looking out for, and it can just help reduce energy costs and improve energy efficiency of homes. Next slide, please, Mark. So yeah, this is the last slide. So I'm just to try to think about the place shaping side of things, and the first point there is about affordable warmth. And so I mean, for us in housing standards, this is the main thing we find. And in terms to address a lot of these well-being and health issues, including damp and mold, living in a cold home, and the health problems that causes, we know from the high level standards that the majority of the 15% of hazards are cold hazards. We know that 28% have got low energy efficiency. Our stock in Baines, particularly Bath, is older than the national average. And it's about trying to find a way to achieve that affordable warmth for all. And it is about, improving the building, but also it's about trying to reduce the cost of heating, of fuel and electricity. So insulation really helps. Solar PV helps reduce the cost to individual households' electricity bill, and low carbon heating. But I think the trick here is what we've got to work on is trying to make some of that renewable electricity accessible at lower cost, which is it doesn't really happen at the moment unless you've got it on your own house. A house stock condition survey about making homes free from hazards, if that will help us inform further any further discretionary licensing scheme, which could be helpful overall. And the other key point that we, in relation to adaptation, disabled facilities grants, is the ability for independent living and adaptability of existing homes. Every household has different circumstances, and I think we need to just look at the resources that we can use to assist with those home adaptations. That's it.
Thank you very much, Chris, and thank you for keeping to 5 minutes, absolutely on the spot. So I'm going to go on to Kirsty Cox, who's going to introduce a discussion, and I think we've also got Jonathan Hampson, and both of whom are from WECA, and I think Pam Turton is also here. I'm going to say I want to keep all those people to 10 minutes so that we do have a good 5 minutes for questions for everybody after that. So Kirsty, over to you.
No problem. Thank you very much, Nicolette. Can you see my screen okay? I'll just turn it into a presentation.
Yes, you can share.
Can you see my screen? Am I sharing my screen?
You're sharing your screen, but can you do it as a slide?
Yep, there you go. Yep. Sorry, I was just checking I was sharing the right one. Lovely. Okay, thank you. Thank you for having us this evening. So as you said, it's myself who is the Combined Authority Project Manager for the Demand Responsive Transport Project. I also have Jonathan Hampson, who is the technology expert who's running the technology for us. So he'll be doing a couple of slides at the end as well. So I'll quickly whittle through these. So today we're here to talk about the DRT system, which is what we've branded as Westlink. So what is Westlink? Where will it operate? How will it operate? How much will it cost? And how will it work? So Westlink is a demand responsive transport service and will be the region's first on-demand bus service. Westlink is a bus service. It is a part of the wider public bus network offer. However, it does not follow a fixed route and it does not follow a timetable, unlike the traditional bus service. It can be used to make those smaller journeys to, for example, to your doctor's surgery, your leisure facilities, local shops, or indeed it could be used for longer journeys to link into the wider high frequency public bus network to go for commuter purposes or for even traveling to the city centre. Our Westlink buses will be able to travel anywhere in between bus stops and designated points within the operating zones. I'll move on to the next slide, which has the zones on them for you to see. And it can also link in, as I said, to the existing bus services and rail routes for that extended journey. So it essentially, the aim of the DRT service is to kind of fill a gap where users do not have that public transport, and to essentially get people out of cars that are struggling to get to a public bus service. And also the Westlink buses will be running regardless. They won't be running, sorry, regardless of whether they have customers or not. They will only be running when the buses are needed. So where will it operate? We're currently going to be doing an initial trial for the Westlink service in these zones. So we've got 2 zones, the northern zone and the southern zone in blue, and then there's also the future transport zone pilot. And the future transport zone is a part of the wider Combined Authority Future Transport Zone project. I wanted to put a map in here of the Bath area and the public transport network, so you can kind of see all of the buses that run into and out of Bath. And then you've got the northern zone and the southern zone, which link in. So essentially, the DRT service will be aiming to link in with these bus services to do that extended journey into and out of the Bath city centre. And also, the aim of DRT, as I said, is trying to link up areas that previously did not have or historically haven't had a bus service. So in those rural areas as well. Excuse me. How much will it cost? So the app, sorry, how will it operate? So the service can be accessed via an app, online, via its website, or also there will be a phone number to call a call centre. The service is, as it says, on demand, so you can phone and it will arrive within 60 minutes, or you can book up to 24 hours in advance if you know when you need to make your journey. The smart technology on the app will be able to match you with your journey with other customers, and the buses that will be available will be 16-seater minibuses, and there will be up to 30 of them across the 3 zones. And these will be accessible minibuses as well. So the Westlink launch will be Monday, the 3rd of April. For the north and south zones, the operating hours are Monday to Saturday, 7 till 7, and there's no Sunday service. The future transport zone pilot will be 5:30 to 9:30, and it also has a Sunday operating hours. That zone is slightly different in that it is a 1-year pilot, and it's got a set of personas that it is targeting the commuters. So that's the difference in the operating hours for that smaller zone. And how much will it cost? So the single fares for any journey length within the zone, so you can travel within your zone. So for example, you can only travel within the northern zone or the southern zone. You can't cross the zone boundaries. And there will be £2 for an adult and £1 for children. And all concessionary passes will be accepted on those buses. Customers can book by the app, by the web or on phone, and you can either pay by credit or debit card, or you can also opt to pay cash on the bus itself. In the future, we will hope to add in the day fare ticket and also through ticketing with other operators as well, so you can link your ticketing across the bus network. The next couple of slides are going to be taken through you with Jonathan. Jonathan is the app provider, the technology provider, so he'll be able to take you through how the app actually works.
Thank you, Kirsty. Good evening, everyone. So my name is Jonathan Hampson. I am not from the Combined Authority. I am the country manager for an organisation called VIA. And as Kirsty said, we are the technology provider behind the Westlink service. I know we don't have long, so I'm just going to quickly talk you through the passenger experience of using the Westlink service. The first thing to stress is that while I'm going to show you some images of the passenger booking app, public transport certainly has to work for all. And so there are multiple ways, as Kirsty said, that you can access the Westlink service depending on your preference. You can phone up, you can book by web, or you can use the mobile app that I'm about to show you now. However you want to access the service, the first thing you need to do is create an account for yourself through any of the methods that I've just said. If you're using the app, you can download it for free from either the Apple App Store or the Google Play Store. Simply search Westlink, all one word, and it will appear. Please note it won't appear now. As I say, we're still a little way from the launch, but it will do obviously before the launch date on the 3rd of April. For security, it will ask you to confirm your mobile phone number, and then you'll receive a code straight away to that number that you need to input. And after that, you simply need to set up an account by putting in your name, email address, and password. You can also add a payment card to your account, making paying for your trips entirely seamless. You can also add in whether you require additional assistance. And for those who do require additional assistance, Westlink will provide a door-to-door service. For all others, as Kirsty said, it will provide a bus stop to bus stop service. Kirsty, next slide. Having set up your account, you're ready to make a booking. Every time you go into the app, it'll know where you are, and it will simply ask you what destination you want to travel to. You can set up favorite destinations. You can set up such as your home, work, any favorites you want. You can input an address, or you can drag the pin to where you want to go to. You then press confirm to set the destination. You can, and it can be anywhere within the zone that you're originating from. You cannot travel from one zone to another zone. You can travel from anywhere to anywhere within the zone that you are starting from. You'll then be asked if you want to add any additional passengers for your trip. Then Kirsty, final slide. And then you have two options when you want to book. You can either travel now and you will receive a trip proposal for when your Westlink minibus will be with you. And as Kirsty said, this will normally be between 5 and 45 minutes, depending on the level of demand and where the vehicles are at that point in time. These kind of on-demand spontaneous trips are great for spontaneous trips, or you can pre-book a trip for later, which can be anything between the end of the following day and up to 30 minutes before you want to travel. You can ask to arrive at a certain time or depart, arrive by a certain time or depart at a certain time. And obviously that's great for things like making appointments, getting to work at a certain time, trips like that. In most cases, once you've pressed confirm on the trip, you will see where the vehicle is coming towards you, so you know when to get ready, when to leave home, and you'll see details of the vehicle that is due to be picking you up. The only thing that I would draw your attention to about booking is that you'll also see details in the app of any fixed route services that are capable of meeting your trip needs. So you can see that on the image on the left underneath the Westlink service. And if a fixed route service is capable of doing your trip need, then you'll also be pointed to the nearest bus stop for that. When on the vehicle, if you've elected to pay by credit or debit card, the payment will be taken automatically as your trip starts. So you simply get on the bus with nothing else required. If you're elected to pay by cash or concessionary fare, the driver will be prompted automatically to ask you for either of these as appropriate. Once you're on the vehicle, you can see in the app your journey along with any other pickups and drop-offs on your route, as well as the ETA of when you're due to be arriving at your destination. So that is the customer experience for Westlink. I'll hand back for any Q&A.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so we've got about 5 minutes for any questions. I can see there's some already in the chat. What I thought I would start, if Laura Ambler is still here, whether she would like to respond to the questions around her presentation, which are in the chat. And if anybody else, then I'll take questions on the other two items, on the housing and on the other ones, if you just want to either raise a virtual hand or put it in the chat. But I'll just start with Laura Ambler.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so I think we had a couple from Dave Redwell. So what is the plan in public health to deal with social inequalities in South Bath and the Somer Valley and poor housing? I think there's quite a lot in there, and perhaps some of the subsequent presentations unpack some of that. So I think, Dave, you know, the village agents, the wellbeing hub, all of those things that are happening on the ground, things like integrated neighbourhood teams in due course are what we're looking at. But effectively, I guess the key message, the key takeaway that I was asking for my presentation is any initiative that we're designing, any service provision that we're proposing needs to be considering those health inequalities in their broadest sense in our design and how they're implemented. So that's the sort of headline. In terms of poor housing, I think I'm just picking up on Chris's presentation. We're working closely with the council. We have something called a community investment fund. We're looking, working with Denise and others in Quartet and Wern and the Wellbeing Hub to think about how we might be able to distribute some of that community investment fund. So that will be going directly to those that need it most. And we can provide an update on that. If I just keep going through the questions, Chair, and then that gives you time for others. I think the only other one was the active travel. Do we consider it being fundamental to improving health outcomes? Absolutely. I didn't cover it, but absolutely it is one of those wider determinants. We know that it's one of the potential solutions, and there are some social prescribing activities in BAMES that absolutely from a health perspective we would support. I think there was another one. Sorry, Chair.
No, I think you've probably you've covered a lot. So I just wanted to.
Okay, I'll pause there.
Yeah, pause there. I'm going to see Denise Perrin. You had a question which I wanted. I've just lost it now. Which, yes, about the transport. So Denise, if you're still there, would you like to ask your question to the Kirsty and
yeah. I can see that the DRT can be a hugely transformative solution, having been a great supporter of community transport and having things moving in the where bus routes don't exist. My concern initially is how we're going to engage with. I think the best experience is going to be if you've got a smartphone and you can work it and use it. Is there going to be quite a good campaign to get people on board from the very start, because we're not very far away, and make it very inclusive?
Yeah, I think in terms of a campaign, we are working with the unitary authorities to get community engagement plans up and running. We are intending on starting a kind of a teaser campaign, so starting the campaign for the service from mid-March, so that we are going to start that early on to get everyone up and running, to kind of introduce the service. This is the first thing that we wanted to do, is make sure that we're talking about what Westlink is and introducing it as a whole. But yes, we are definitely getting it on the ground and working with the UAs on that.
Thank you. I'm going to have to stop the questions there, and I'm going to hand over to, I think, probably Dave, or if not Mark, to just very quickly update us on a couple of notices there from the council.
Yeah, good evening, everybody. Yeah, just for the final little things, just a couple of sort of parish notices in a sense. One is obviously about local elections. Obviously, changes in national legislation that have taken place quite recently mean for the first time voters are going to need to show photographic ID when they go to the polling stations. So that will mean the local elections in May. If you don't have an accepted form of voter ID, you can apply for a free voter authority certificate online or by completing a paper form. And you can also apply for them in person at the Guildhall in Bath. So additional staff are going to be put onto the polling stations, because obviously if you don't have an acceptable photographic ID, you're not going to be able to take part in those local elections. And then the other thing is the cycle hangers, which I think there's an article in the Bath Echo, I think today or yesterday actually, about some of them that have been put in around by Sydney buildings. There is a consultation on the 20 cycle hangers that potentially can be introduced into the city. If you have a look at the Bath Echo article, you'll be able to see what actually some of them look like in situ, because there's some photographs in the article itself. And if you've got any comments or any ideas or suggestions around that consultation, then please take part in that, and we will provide you with the web link with this part of the information following this meeting. I think that's it, Chair.
Thank you. And so thank you everybody for coming, contributing so well, and lasting for what was overpacked, overlong to our meeting. I think it just goes to show that there's huge appetite for all these perspectives, these contributions to overcoming the challenges and creating the future we want for our city. We now have the break. As we know, there will be a lot of campaigning going on in the next few weeks. So the next meeting of the forum will be on the 19th of June, by which time we will have a new council administration in place, or will have been in place for a week or two. So look forward to seeing as many people as you can there. In the meantime, do take every opportunity you have during the electioneering to really argue for what you want to see happen in our city. And with that, I will, 1 minute early, I will end the meeting, although I think actually probably somebody else has got to physically end the meeting.